Would like to introduce myself. My name is Iffy Ike. I'm the president of the CBCF Alumni Association. We just want to thank everyone for coming to this panel, which is called Where Are They Now?, which is basically to just have a very intimate discussion with current leaders and also former CBCF scholarship, fellowship recipient holders that currently are in different fields, and we are also using this as a way to introduce ourselves to current interns, and we know that a lot of interns are working in their member offices, and some of you all may have to run in and out. So we appreciate everyone that's here. Because it is a small attendance, we just ask that if you do speak, that you just state your name so that we can get to know you. Feel free to move up. I also want to introduce Jessica Childress here, who serves as our scholarship chair. So any questions that you have or any ideas that you have pertaining to partnerships, sponsorships, areas that you would like to see us grow in the area of scholarship, whether as a former CBCF recipient or a current intern or fellow, please let her or I know. And what I would like is for us to kind of just get right into the discussion. This is being videotaped, so we also understand that this is going to be shown over a period of time, which is great, because what the knowledge that is up here, and I've spoken intimately with many of the panelists here in various spectrums in the past, but I know all of their bios and they're amazing. And we're also, she will give an introduction for herself, but we're also honored to be here with Janice Hazel, who is the first CBCF recipient under the legendary Shirley Chisholm. So she has a lot of wealth of knowledge. If you can just raise your hand real quick, Janice, so people know who you are. She has a wealth of knowledge, and she also has been the one basically in charge of keeping alumni together up until this point. So she will also talk about the importance of what it means to be family, what it means to connect, and also what needs to happen moving forward. I would like for each of our panelists to introduce themselves, but before we move forward, I also would like to hear who we have in the audience. So if you can just quickly state your name, if you are in an office, just let us know what office you represent. If you're not in office, please let us know what you're doing very briefly as far as what company you work for, and then we're going to go right into the introductions from our panelists. So we can start from the corner over here.
I am a 2008 congressional intern. I interned in the office of Congressman Benny Thompson, where I then afterwards worked for 4 years until recently assuming my new position. So.
Hello everyone, my name is Katrina McNair. I am currently a Teach for America Corps member in Baltimore City Public Schools. I'm a 2011 CBCF intern. I interned in Congressman Bobby Scott's office, and I currently go to Johns Hopkins University.
Hi, I am Janice Hazel, and I interned in 1982 for the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. I served under Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, and I currently am managing partner of Hazel & Associates Public Relations, and I'm an elected official here in the District of Columbia in Ward 7, Seat 7D05 Advisory Neighborhood Commission.
I'm Marcus Schweitzer. I'm the director of the African American Major Donor Fundraising at the DNC, and I was the 2005 CBC Scholarship recipient. Congresswoman Gwen Moore, the best Congresswoman.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Quentin James, currently the director of the Sierra Student Fellowship at the Sierra Club, it's the youth arm of the Sierra Club, and in 2 weeks I'll be starting a new job. Going to be the director of African American Outreach for the Ready for Hillary PAC. Oh wow! Yeah, I'm excited about it. But I was a 2009 CBCF intern for former Representative Kilpatrick from the city of Detroit, Michigan.
Awesome. And I just wanted to, before I introduce where I served, I wanted to also introduce Ms. Anita Johnson, who just came in, who serves as our secretary for the Alumni Association Board. So my name is Iffy Ike, as I stated. I am a 2010 to 2012 fellow for the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. I started off working with the late Congressman Donald M. Payne from New Jersey, and then I went on to serve with the U.S. House Judiciary. I currently am a policy advocate for the Innocence Project in New York. I'm also the founder of Ike Professionals, LLC, which basically just works with individuals with their ideas, policy, and just making sure that people have the right support to basically promote either their idea or to fulfill whatever dream they're pursuing. And as I stated, I'm also the president of the CBCF Alumni Association. So we're just going to go right into our discussion. It's a very we want to keep this very open, fluid conversation. There are some questions that we will go through with the panelists, but we also want to ensure that there's enough time for you all to ask, especially since many of you all are current interns and currently serve in, as what I like to say, policymakers in your own right. So we want to make sure you all are equipped with some good sound knowledge, but we also have a lot to learn from you. So that being said, I want to just kind of go right into, if each one of you don't have to answer all of these questions, but I do want to hear from each one of you as to what was the biggest lesson you learned from working on the Hill and or agency for those who worked in agencies. And anyone can start that.
I guess I'll start it if you guys don't mind. Before leaving Capitol Hill, I served as the president of the Congressional Black Associates, which is the African American staff-led organization, basically for all minority Black people on the Hill. One of the major lessons that I learned was to take advantage of your opportunities. You don't get many of them as people of color, but when you do get those opportunities, do your best work at it. Before leaving the Hill, I served as the staff assistant and legislative correspondent for my member of Congress. And, you know, that's kind of like the gatekeeper to any office, right? That means your workload is heavy and your dollars are few. But in doing that, though, you know, it's not the most glorious job, you know. Of course, it's not the chief of staff and it's not the LD, but the job that it is, it gives you access to people. And one thing that no one can take from you is your ability to speak and to be heard and to be thoughtful in all of your approaches. And so if I could give you any advice, it would be to take advantage of all your opportunities. Whether you're as an intern, you know, I worked. We were only supposed to go to work 4 days a week. I went 5 because I knew at the end of the day I had a goal, and that goal was to get hired on Capitol Hill and to get on Capitol Hill and do my best work. You know, I came to this city with one thing, and that was my name, and I made my name. You know, that's on, when they hear Waukenian, they know, oh, that's that girl on Capitol Hill, and she's if you want a job, she's who you probably want to talk to, just because she took advantage of her opportunities. She built her network, and she used her network to help other people. So take advantage of your opportunities.
I'll go next. Similar to what you were saying, I definitely agree. I was an intern in 2011, which wasn't that long ago, and one thing that I learned was to make conversations with people that you meet. I was still in college when I was an intern, so I was like, okay, there's a lot of high-level people that I'm meeting. Maybe they don't have time to talk to me. If, we're human, everyone's human. Make a conversation and, a genuine conversation with people that you meet. I attended the ALC conference in 2011 completely by myself, but I met a lady named Bizniche, who goes by Biz, and I just started to talk to her, and she actually invited me in January of that year to come work in the White House in the Office of Presidential Personnel, and I was able to work there for 6 months, and I got to meet a lot of people, and I would say that my ability to just open up to people and have genuine conversations with anyone that you meet in the hallway, ALC conference, if you're in school. There's a lot of people who have general similar interests to you, so definitely take advantage of opportunities.
Well, I would say that my experience when I was an intern for Congresswoman Chisholm, and I had the advantage of working for all the members of Congress, which there were only, I think, 12 at that point in time, Black members of Congress. And it was quite instructional, and the way in which the Congresswoman rolled, if you will, which has taken me through the rest of my career, the rest of my life. And that was to be able to do things on the fly, on the cuff, on the steps, on the stairs, walking, being able to write a speech, being able to absorb information, and to read cues, read people, read physical cues, read your boss to know what the stress points are and what you should be doing. And I think most of us can read certain things, but I think one of the things that I was able to learn very quickly in that environment was how to read a room, read the temperature of what the votes might be, and be able to assess that quickly and put that information in the hands of my member. And that will take you very far. I also served for my congressman, which was Congressman John Conyers, the second summer. I first did my internship right after my freshman year in college at the University of Michigan. And then my second summer, I was a Lyndon Baines Johnson congressional intern with a stipend. There was no stipend. Let me just say that. There was no stipend back in 1982, and I'm so very glad and proud that the sponsors have come on board to provide for all of you who've come behind me. There was no housing provided. My parents paid for that, and they invested in me. My second internship with Congressman Conyers, was incredible. That was the summer of 1983 when the Martin Luther King holiday bill was passed, and I was able to sit in committee with the congressman when it was passed, something that he'd been doing for 18 years after the assassination of Reverend King. And in those environments, as you stated, is very, very fast, very quick pace, and learning to read people and the energy, and that oftentimes can tell you how things are going to go, how a vote's going to go before it even happens, and be able to relay that before the internet, before text messages, back to your member. And I would say that served me very well as I transitioned into other positions on the Hill. Also served later on as Congressman Conyers' legislative director, and I came to Washington to work for my senator, which was Senator Regal at that time, who's since retired. But then I went on to be a lobbyist, and so I had to read both sides of the equation. The members of Congress, their staff, as well as other lobbyists on the other side of the idea or the issue or the legislation. So I think being a quick study and always being observant of your environment and the people, and so you can read things and come out on top.
I think two things I'd add to that, one, if you have the opportunity to build a relationship with a mentor or somebody that knows the area that you're interested in, or they don't even have to know the area you're interested in, but somebody that's here or wherever you want to be that can be a mentor to you, keep that relationship and build that relationship. I was a White House intern at the National Economic Council summer 2009, and my mentor, she was a small Asian lady. But I thought I was hot stuff coming out of college, and she quickly, chopped me down. But you have to hustle to get what you want. You are special, but you're not that special. And so knowing that and building those types of relationships so that people can, check you when you need to be checked, push you when you need to be pushed, tell you and be really honest with you, because that is how you kind of can go farther. And I think. So having that mentor, building those relationships, but then also, from that, you got to hustle. You got to, if you want something, you got to figure out what it is and figure out, triangulate ways to get it.
Wow, lots been said. I don't want to rehash. A couple of things I will say. There's a balance you have to play of working hard and being humble, but also being bold. So I remember as an intern, one thing I did when I first started was I asked my chief of staff for business cards. And she was like, no one's ever asked me for business cards before, but since you did, sure, I will get you business cards. And so being able to think beyond just the internship. So because I did work hard, and that's been mentioned over and over, I was hired on after my internship because the staff assistant quit or moved on, got a new job. So instead of hiring someone else, they just moved me up as an intern. So I would say definitely let your work speak for you, whether it's getting coffee, making copies, whatever it is, driving your member around. Do your job really well, and it will speak for you in terms of being able to make asks like, hey, can I staff the Congresswoman tonight at this event, or can I go do this thing that, you aren't already assigned to, but again, we'll continue to develop you, and you can be bold and make those requests if you are working hard.
And I just want to quickly add that, everything that was said here, I think it would have been great to hear this. You could literally tape it and hear it every day, and you could still apply it on and off the Hill. One area that I keep stressing, and I've even stated it for those who attended alumni reception a couple months ago, is that knowing, it's part of what Janice was talking about as far as knowing how to read, knowing the difference between relaying to your boss that an issue is important, and knowing how to actually work with them or help them strategize as to why, not only why it's important, but why they should act on it. I think one of the it's not a bad thing. We all come here and we all have these ambitions to, I want to serve, I want to do something important, especially if it's your state or your district. I want to be I want to help my people. And at the same time, you kind of get shut down, or you kind of feel like you're getting shut down when every time you go to your member and you're like, there's this issue going on, and it's like, okay, yeah, I'll look at it. And then you come again, well, we should really do this, or you go to your chief of staff, or you go to the LD. And what I realized very quickly is that there's a way to communicate to your member that this is not just an important issue, because every issue actually that we deal with on the Hill is important. But you also need to kind of be more proactive with why the member should be a leader in that issue. And actually, that was one of the key I guess, communication strategies for me, is that I wanted my member to really stand out as being the proponent of an issue instead of just a follower of an issue. So just thinking of ways that you can serve your member is critical. And then also kind of dealing with being humble. Remember that you are not the one that was elected. And I think that that's something that really does, unfortunately, skip over the heads of a lot of staffers, not necessarily because they're cocky. They actually want to do the best work, but recognizing, again, dealing with what Ms. Hazel had stated of knowing how to read, recognizing the characters and the personalities in your office, recognizing that each person has their own ambitions as well, and respecting that, and knowing that if you serve as the best servant, you probably will have a lot more longevity than gambling and being, a superstar in an area that is not necessarily built for that. So I want to go right into the whole issue of diversity on the Hill. We all were there at different times on the Hill, so I just want each one of you all to briefly, or for whoever wants to speak on this, address how diversity played a role in your fellowship or internship, but also what we need to do as a community and as a CBCF community to increase diversity on the Hill and to allow us to stay, and I might add, to get high-level, good-paying positions on the Hill. And anyone can start that conversation, or even off the Hill.
I'm going to give a historical perspective since I go back a little ways, 3 decades. When I got to the Hill on the Senate side, there were virtually no blacks, Asians, Hispanics in legislative staff capacities. There were people in the mailrooms, which that is a very, very important function. There was, depending on the demographics of the state or district, oftentimes there might be a black face or a Hispanic face or an Asian face at the front desk, meaning the receptionist or really that was it. But in legislative capacities, as in of council, it really was not there. So it was an amazing experience to be on the legislative staff of a white member of Congress, which all of the senators at that time were white, and to build a network. I think it was at the founding of the Congressional Black Associates and the Senatorial Staff Associates way back then. And the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation really spoke for all other ethnic groups, the Asian, Latino, as well as women. I don't know the exact date of the founding of the Women's Congressional Caucus, Asian Pacific Islanders, but the foundation, CBCF, really did carry the water for all of those voices. So my experience at that time was very few blacks and even less of other ethnic makeups. And I'll even go further for those people who happen to have physical challenges, physical impairments or disabilities. It really wasn't there. When I left the Hill on one occasion to go to be a lobbyist for the commercial building industry, representing all commercial builders in the United States, Japan, the United Kingdom, Australia, we were crafting at that time the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's something that all of you have grown up and gone into workforce, academic environments, convention centers, and Capitol Hill, which Capitol Hill was actually rather resistant in the ADA bill at that time. This is circa 1987, 88, 89. And so people with disabilities, visual impairments, and physical impairments are very near and dear to my heart because those are some of the things that I worked on and was able to actually get past. So when you see Braille on an elevator, that was something that I actually had my fingerprint on. In addition to looking at some of the structures here, very sexy issues like sprinkler retrofitting for our safety. Those are some of the things that I actually worked on way back in the day. And there were no other black lobbyists looking back at me, and then looking at the legislative staff people on the Senate or House side. And then as a woman, I was one of the first in that environment. Very few women and very few black women and or Asian or Hispanic or Native American who were on the Hill or lobbyists in other environments, trade associations representing industry or nonprofits. So I've seen a lot pass through the organizations like Congressional Black Associates, the Senate side counterpart, and other organizations. There's a Black Lobbyist Group that we formed, are really instrumental in incubating and assisting people of color or of various demographics, be it a physical disability or a gender. And I say that you should always affiliate yourself with something so that you can have camaraderie and learn within that group. But you should always, in terms of being on the Hill or off the Hill as a lobbyist or in a think tank, take advantage of everyone around you, particularly if you've gone to a majority school and not a HBCU. You know, your colleagues are going to be of the majority class, which is most likely predominantly white. I would say that that is where your strength lies, is to always affiliate with groups that are akin to your particular demographic, but also spread your wings and be all over the place in other organizations. So I've seen a lot of change, and then I've seen some retrenchment that's going on. And for me, part of my legacy as I move into retirement is to continue.
You can't retire at 30.
Is to continue the each one teach one. So I'm very, very pleased to be able to say that throughout my career, I have promoted the foundation's internships and fellowships and brought other black students into the fold in the scholarship realm, in the internship realm, and the fellowship realm. Many of them have lived with me because, you know, before the actual housing component was put into place. So there's a long way to go still, because there still aren't as many people of color and women on the Hill lobbying for issues, and I certainly hope that all of you will continue to rise and stay in those ranks.
Well, I would love to say, and I think this is one of my main reasons even being here, we need more black fundraisers, period. I think that, you know, and that kind of opens up into campaign world in general as well, but you know, you'd be kind of surprised to see how few folks kind of, you know, stay the course, especially in campaign world. You know, you may have a tier, you know, a cycle of it or a cycle or two of people who are, you know, consistent, long-term people that are looked to, you know, and I can speak to directly the fundraising world, but in campaigns in general, I think we have a long way to go I think, there's a couple of, reasons why, when you look at a campaign, it's over in 2 years or a year, or it's a short stint of time. And a lot of times, like we don't come from very particularly wealthy places where you can't, not have a job. I remember times my mom was like, what are you doing? That job is going to be over in November, and then what are you going to do? You moving back home? No. But, but figuring out, and even kind of jumping into that and understanding that, if you keep going and you keep pushing and you're good at your job, you actually, you're not going to be unemployed. You can actually have a really thriving and successful career in campaigns and in politics, even if the kind of the initial unpaid internship, is hard to get through, or it's kind of daunting to think that you have an end date to your employment. For me in doing fundraising, I think that, once you get to a certain point, people know your skill set. And so people always need to raise money everywhere, not even, politically, when you think about, issue advocacy or a different organization. And that's now a skill set, for me that I can kind of always use going forward. But, I think having the each one teach one and having people kind of see and know that, it's a viable option. It's something that you can do and you can keep pushing that forward. So.
And just to aid to what you all have just previously mentioned, when I served as president of CBA, during the last year's ALC, we did a forum on diversity, right? Because we were living in 2012 and there were still issues of diversity on Capitol Hill. When you think about diversity and inclusion, you see sprinkles, right? You guys are on the Hill now, so you see sprinkles of color here or there. And CBA played a very vital role, or has played a very vital role, shall I say, in making sure that those sprinkles become more permanent marks. As interns of color, your job, your number one responsibility to the people coming after you is to set an example, to show the people who may not look like you what you are capable of and what people of your same background are capable of. When I came to the Hill, one of the things that was most shocking for me is that I saw people who looked like me that carried themselves in awesome ways, right? But then those same people weren't always as welcoming as they should have been, right? And being from the South, now one thing that we do take pride in is courtesy. Yes. So, I made it my business to speak to people, even if they didn't speak back. I made sure that if they weren't having a good day, they knew that I was. And so, my nice little Southern twang and my nice little pearly little teeth, all set the tone for that. But, back to the relevant part, which is the issue of diversity, it's important that you make sure that people understand what you're capable of, right? The diversity is so lacking on the Hill, and so many, when you look at upper level management, you may have maybe 20 chiefs of staff that are of African American descent, majority of them working for members of the CBC, that speaks volumes, right? It speaks volumes to the issues that we still have to deal with in modern day society. So your role as interns, and I can say that because I was there, is to walk those same halls with the pride and knowing that you deserve to be there, for one, and two, that you're capable of doing the work that's being done in that building. Because you really want to know the truth about it, 20-somethings make this world go round. And your role in that, I'm cycling out of the 20-something field, I got a little time left, but in that same vein, I'm passing the torch to you because I'm looking forward to what you're going to do. I'm looking forward to you, really combating those statistics. It's so sad that the governing body doesn't want a diversity and inclusion report done on minorities because they don't have to say, well, if it's so important for businesses, why is it so important for you? And so those are the types of things that you fight with, on a different level. But I think I really commend the foundation for all of its work in making sure that there are faces that look like you and I that are there on that Hill. And I commend you all for being able to be those faces, to be those means of representation, because it means a lot. I was on the Hill for 4 years, and every year since I was on Capitol Hill, there were multiple students from Tougaloo College in Tougaloo, Mississippi that came to Capitol Hill that summer, that spring, that fall. That was my obligation to where I came from, and you all should pass that same thing on. Diversity doesn't, it's not something that we ride on the backs of the civil rights movement. We are the civil rights movement. This is your opportunity to make sure that people look like you stay in positions of influence and power.
And I would just like to add on to what you were saying. I think the main thing that I saw when I was an intern was access. And I do believe that finances has a lot to do with it for interns of color. And the CBCF Foundation did a great job of getting a lot of students who would have never had an opportunity to intern in DC, the opportunity to come to DC. I mean, housing and a stipend, I have no idea how many internships are in DC that give you housing and a stipend. If none, only the CBCF. I can't think of another one. So providing that access door is very important. And I would say just making sure that people back home and people who aren't in DC or people who may be living on the West Coast, I don't know where you're from, that there is opportunity and access here. Because a lot of times people see a door between the Hill or a door between being in DC and where they're from, simply because it's hard to just get up and jump and move to DC if you don't have that financial support back home. And even for me, I paid my way through my bachelor's degree. And my last semester of college, I was a senior when I had the opportunity to serve as an associate in the White House. It wasn't paid, and I had no support. My mom was like, "You're crazy. You're going to DC." No housing was provided, no money was provided, and I was paying tuition. I don't know how I did it, but I lived in my aunt's basement, and a lot of my friends were just like, "I wouldn't do that. You're going to DC. You're going to be away from home. What are you doing for 6 months?" But just, letting people know that sometimes you do have to jump. Sometimes you do have to take opportunities. You don't know when they're going to come again. Take advantage of it. You might fail. That's okay. But on the other hand, you might be able to just make it. And when you do make it, it's an inspiration to others who do look like you, to let them know that there are opportunities. You just need to take advantage of them, and you shouldn't be afraid. You shouldn't set yourself back because you see this door that's just closed off because you think that money is the only way to access this world, and money is not the only way.
Figure it out because it's worth it.
Figure it out. That's the best right.
So I love this conversation. So another piece of my background is civil rights. So from 2009 to 2013, this past July, I was on the national board for NAACP. And so it talks about diversity. This is also about representation in terms of issues. So when I was in the office of Congressman Kilpatrick from Detroit, it was right after the economic downturn of 2008. And so one of the issues that you all might know about is in the city of Detroit, one of the off effects of the auto industry and the banks were supermarkets. So in the entire city of Detroit, which is the largest city geographically in the country, there were only 2 grocery stores open right after the economic downturn. And so one of my jobs as an intern was to work on environmental issues. How do we get fresh fruit to the city? What can we do as an office? So we worked to set up urban gardens and create this new kind of food chain in the city until we could get some more stores in the district. So that little example kind of got me into the environmental space, which is where I've been for the past 4 years. And one of the things I'll kind of tell you to think about is, in your internship, what will you be remembered for in your office? But not only in your office, from people outside your office. So whether it be nonprofit organizations, lobbyists, advocacy groups, what will they remember about you? And so one thing that I did, I worked with the group called Green for All, which is started by Van Jones before he went to the White House, on this piece of work in Detroit. And so after my internship, guess where I got a job? At Green for All. And so I was able to take my internship experience, this one little project that I got assigned to, and develop it into now a long-term career path. And so I would encourage you all to think about whatever issue it is. This piece about diversity and equity will also align with that issue. So we talk about the environment, obviously this issue around environmental justice. So you have tons of interest, tons of money going to work on energy and the environment. But those communities that are being most affected are our communities, places like Detroit or Memphis or New Orleans, where we have CBC members, but sometimes, to be honest, they aren't always at the table for multiple reasons in those conversations in those rooms. And so the other piece of advice I would give to you is to, whether it's once a week or once every 2 weeks, go to a hearing or to a meeting on your issue so you learn the players in the room and folks on the outside trying to get into that room. Because your access is not just here to put on your resume, it's actually you're here to do work and here to help your community. And so on my piece, I work in the environmental space where there are literally like no Black people. And what we've been trying to do over the past few years is change that dynamic. So we know folks are qualified, we know folks would do the work. It's just a matching interest to opportunity. So that's what we've been doing in the environmental space. But it's really important, again, to take your issue and a little project you can have on the Hill. It could actually turn into a long-term career path if you do the work. You're walking in representing Black America, and that pressure can be tough, but it can also be a huge opportunity and a huge value point for those in the room as well.
And let me just,
If I might do a follow-up to that, again, a historical perspective. Looking at the median age in the room, I don't know, I might be wrong, but I rather doubt that you've actually encountered racism and or sexism head-on, which I have in my capacities working on the Hill and in other environments. And what I would encourage you to do is to get your spirit filled and have your family really embrace you when you do come to the Hill, if that's the environment that you go to after you do your internships. Experiences that I had, as I said, one of the greatest tools that I have cultivated is learning to read situations. And when I left the Hill, where there were very few Blacks in legislative capacities, even fewer women in legislative capacities 3 decades ago, and going off to an environment where it was all white men, and then going off to another environment that was commercial building industry, then going off to the broadcasting industry to represent public broadcasters. Being from Detroit, being from Michigan, you get a little skewed in your perspective that the world is Black, because Detroit has for many years been one of the, if not the most segregated city in the country, it has been said. And I will say that I felt very, very empowered growing up in a very Black city where the mayor, the fire chief, everyone was Black, and it was about empowerment. Fast forward going into an environment where it's all men, so it's not just race, it's also gender situations. And I have encountered times when I've had to go to meetings to represent my industry, to do my job, but was told you can't go there because they did not believe it was safe for me because I was Black. And I'm talking about even going back to my state, to Michigan, to go to the Upper Peninsula, to go to a conference. I would say to you, if ever you encounter that, and I hope that you don't at this point in time, but if ever you have encountered someone else putting a barrier in front of you because they think because you're Black or because you're young or because you are a female or because you are of some other demographic other than the majority, then you think on your feet very fast of how to move through that. And I'll give you an example. I had to go to a meeting, and it was for the public broadcasting industry, and it was in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And if you guys know your geography, you've got the thumb, you've got the mitten, and you've got the rabbit. And so those of us who are Black tend to be down here in southeastern Michigan. You get outside of that area, it is pretty much white, just as the manufacturing hub is down here. The rest of the state is agricultural. So, in going to the agricultural oasis of the Upper Peninsula, my boss, who was a white male, did not think it was safe for me to go. Why? Because they thought I would fly in to an environment and then drive, which I said, nope, can't drive up there. There's militia in those areas, okay? And some of you may or may not know what the militia is, but it's effectively Ku Klux Klan 20th century, okay? And so I said, I'm gonna go to that conference because it's my job, and I'm not going to be held back because of other people's issues, but what you will do for me is you will fly me in to the Upper Peninsula. I will not be driving, as my parents would have been spastic, thinking that I was driving by myself in militia land, if you will, to get to a conference in the backwoods in the Upper Peninsula. And so what the industry did, I did the research, and the internet wasn't really there. It wasn't really what it is today. But I found a pilot, a two-seater plane, that would pick me up from the commercial plane flying into the larger airport and then a smaller, and then take me to directly, we had to find a landing strip area, but directly to the conference. So I could be there and then pick me up going back. You have to think beyond, as my colleague said, outside the box so that you can get your job done, even if others think that you can't just because of your demographic, which might be your color or your age or your disability or your gender. I've had a number of experiences where I was told, and this is just in the 1980s and 1990s, that you can't go to that. I can't go to something to represent and do my job because they won't understand you or they won't embrace you. And that was all white men. And that's what was effectively being said. It wasn't said in terms of, these white men are not going to want to hear what you have to say. But you have to break through that, and you have to do it sometimes with force and be bold. Sometimes you have to be tender and gentle, but you've got to do your job and don't let anyone else keep you away because of their perspective, their position, or their fear. I've experienced it. I hope you don't. But if you do, think quickly. How can you move through that so you can get your job done and make your mark?
And so what I love about this question is what's been highlighted is that diversity, which I'm so glad the panelists have raised in their answers, is not just about color, right? They've talked about diversity as far as issues, diversity as far as ability. They've talked about diversity as far as, which I think is very key as a staffer, portfolio, and recognizing either where your boss should be a leader or where your community should be a leader or should address a certain issue, or recognizing where, as many people had mentioned, where we're left out of the conversation and what you can do to be that voice in your offices. What I find to be so interesting, right, is that the more I hear about the stories of fellow alum and what I consider family, is that I always sit and think, what would have happened if Janice didn't fly there? What would have happened if Quentin did not focus on environmental justice?
Bernie would never be here today.
Well, exactly. I think that that's something that what's so great is that we are literally part of history, and we're watching. Each person that you meet is literally a part of history. If you just sit and talk about, what did you do? Never let it just be, oh, I just got coffee. Oh, I just, photocopied. No, you photocopied something that led to something. You got coffee for somebody who was tired, and because of that coffee is now awake to handle something. Connect all of your experiences to the magnitude of what it is that we're really doing here, serving, 39.1 billion, whatever people in the United States. This place only consists of how many, not even 1,000 collectively on both the Senate and the House side. That's extreme. And as one member had explained to me, each office is almost like its own private business, right? Which is why you can go into some offices and you're like, dang, I'm not allowed to do that. Or, people come into your offices and the culture is extremely different. So what I actually love to do when I moderate is actually separate the panel to allow for some questions from the audience, but I really just want, and then we're going to get back into the set questions that we have, but I really just want, I can't stress enough how it's important to diversify your portfolio and to really take the challenge to work in areas that you may not have even been asked to come when you came into the office. I know for me, one of the major areas that I was told on day one that I had to handle was Haiti. And I was like, Haiti doesn't sound like housing, because that's what I came in for. I was like, those are two very different words. But they said, no, we need somebody to focus on Haiti. And one thing that I realize is that there are certain sectors, I would say foreign relations, business, there are certain, your learning curve, you just have to catch up. And one thing that I was never going to do was to say, I'm not able to do ... It just wasn't going to be part of my vocabulary. So I had to find out everything I had to know about not just Haiti and their construction, but U.S.-Haiti relationships, U.S. Western Hemisphere relationships, U.S. Caribbean relationships, all so that at some point I could create strategies on how are we going to help our people that just happen to be in a different location. So recognize that when we talk about diversity, as I'm sure many of you all are realizing, diversity is not just about you representing, African Americans on the Hill. In a lot of ways, you are the only way somebody in another country is going to have a voice that looks like you in Congress, period. So at this time, I just want to separate some of our set questions and see if there are any questions from the panelists, anything that you want to ask anybody in particular, or if there's anything that you're dealing with, not even with any of the issues that we've raised, but something that you would either like to see the CBCF build on, or something that you feel has been important in what you're going through that you want the panelists to address.
Okay, I actually forgot that I did intern with a CBC member. I just forgot because y'all kind of just put me on the spot when I walked in. And I did do a year there. I wasn't a CBC intern, but I did intern for a CBC member. The question that I have is, I guess I know in a way what, like why some people won't hire, us for different jobs, but what do you all feel are the issues or other reasons that, there's not a lot of Black people on the Hill?
You had anybody you want to answer?
All of y'all. Anybody?
I guess I'll tackle it first, then I'll pass the ball. I think a lot of times people are unable to get past certain barriers because of a lack of understanding. People don't, when they see something that's different, they would rather run from it than embrace it. And I like to think it's our differences that makes us unique and makes each person able to contribute something to the team. And so over the last couple of years that I've been on the Hill, what we've noticed is that when we start having the conversation around differences, we get people who are then say, I never thought about it this way. Or, something as simple as your hair, and I think that's the ongoing conversation right now. People, they have a lot of opinions as it relates to hair, but not really understanding the cultural aspect to that, right? So I wear my hair natural because that's my preference, because I'm comfortable with who I am. My mother gets a relaxer because that's her preference, and she's comfortable with that space in which who she is. So I think a lot of the struggle, particularly for women, that we have in terms of advancing on the Hill, and why we sometimes feel like we have to operate inside of a box, it's because we're afraid to let people see who we truly are, because we're fearful that they won't embrace us. So, and it's really sad to say, but that's the reality of it. When you go around to, I even had people who look like you and I say to me, you just change your hair so much. I said, I changed my hair because it's my hair, and I want to do what I want to do with it. It doesn't affect, my ability to work and be effective and to be knowledgeable of issues. I went to an HBCU, and I had to relax every day. I decided to come to DC and this whole professional world and say, I'm gonna go natural, But it doesn't, it's just a part of a lack of understanding. People, and a lot of times we do things and we don't understand why we do them, right? Some people have, dreadlocks, and they don't know, they just think it's a style. Some people have it because of the cultural reference that goes along with having dreadlocks. It's all a preference, it's a lack of understanding. But in order to get past certain barriers, you have to be not afraid of who you are, so much so that you can tell somebody else who you are and then help them gain the understanding. You have a lot of stigmas out here, and we play into some of them, other people play into them, but at the end of the day, you've got to be able to be comfortable enough with yourself to feel free in sharing yourself with someone else.
And let me just say really quickly, because my brain is going through I'm forgetting stuff, starting to turn into my grandfather. Two things very quickly. Number one, and just because we're a family, I would say one of the issues that I see is that sometimes we don't want to take the position that's offered to us. So I'm just going to put that out there. Now, I'm not saying that you are not above what you're being offered, because I think what's so great about the CBCF scholastic and fellowship opportunities is that it's pretty much the number one compliment that people say about our group is just the stellar professionalism that we exhibit that far exceeds even the title of, intern, or we can't change the title intern or fellow. That's what it is. But making no mistake, you are a staffer, and in some ways, depending on the issue, you may be LD. Depending on the issue, you may be chief of staff. It just depends. And so, never lose sight of the fact that a plant always starts as a seed. And I think that even when I just look at Wakinya, I don't think people understand how proud I am of her to be so humble. And, people have their own opinions of what a staff assistant is or what an LC is. She's now an executive director. And I think that she's probably heard more than from anyone. Where they do that? Huh? Right, exactly.
In fact, I got an event on that on Sunday, how to do that.
Right, but what she exhibited was that she did not let any role define her, but she also was humble enough to not say that I'm too above any role. So I think that that's one issue. I will also say another issue is sometimes, and this was, I believe both Katrina and Janice touched on this, but I think everybody kind of touched on this as well. Recognize that you are not limited to the CBC, which many of you are working in offices outside of the CBC, but even when you start looking at your job search, be bold to step out into offices that don't have anybody that looks like you. Because the reality is, whether or not you're comfortable with somebody of a race or not, an office knows if they lack diversity. Mm-hmm. They know that if you come in and you say, I'm applying for this position, that when you leave, they're going to have to sit back and say, why are we not going to take this black person? Especially if we have no black people in this office, and I'm sure we have black people in our state. So think about that. Think about the power that you have, and it's weird to say that, but think about the power that you have as a minority. Sometimes the word minority is used, and it's always negatively used, but also recognize what minority means. Recognize that you are the minority voice, and that should be part of your pitch. So I'm giving this for free. Like, for you to say, I am here to represent the voice that is not represented in your district. I am here to represent people that do exist, but unfortunately, they're not hearing their issues. Oh, by the way, did you know that this Head Start is about to close in your district? Have a good day. Always leave them with something that they don't necessarily focus on, and they have to then question or ponder or consider that you are bringing something that they don't currently have. So those, I would just say, are two areas where I find that diversity is lacking, but also, just to be very real, it also has to do with the money aspect. It is hard to make a living, if you will, on the Hill outside of being within a certain positions. So that is also something that has to be considered, and it's something that the CBCF and a lot of different partners are trying to work on, and that even the Alumni Association that we've been looking at as to how can people say, I'm doing a great job as a policymaker, and I would love for this to be a lifetime opportunity, if so be it. But I want to survive. I want to be able to have a family, and I want to be able to, contribute to my community as well.
Yeah, I think there are a few points on that, and I see some other hands, so I'm going to be brief. There's some also cultural pieces with our generation as millennials that Capitol Hill hasn't caught up with yet, right? So for instance, there's a retirement program on Capitol Hill. If you work 20 years or more, you can retire. Any of you all plan on working 20 years on Capitol Hill?
No.
If I do that, I would.
Well, what I'm saying, though, is for a long time in our community, especially middle class African Americans, being a staff assistant or LD or whatever it is for 20 years was a huge, amazing opportunity that you would never think about not doing. Our generation wants a new job every 5 years, if not less, right? And so thinking about, there are some real barriers around race and around who we hire. Because, as somebody who hires staff now, we hire who we know and who we have networks with. That isn't always right, but that's how hiring happens in the real world. There are some best practices to change that, which I know the CBCF and the CBCA on the Hill has been working on, but that's just the truth. But I think the other piece to what you were saying is, do you want to make the sacrifice for the career? Do you want to be a staff assistant for 2, 3, 4 years if you have to be, making $35,000 or less if you have to be a chief of staff? That isn't the only pathway there, but it's one pathway. So I think there are some real world barriers to employment and diversity, but I think there also needs to be some work done on our half as alumni and as a CBCF to get folks who want to be in government and keep them there long term, because that's just the sacrifice with the system at the moment.
If I might, I'd like to address what the young woman in the reddish color asked, specifically if we were aware, I think, if I'm paraphrasing, of any obstacles or issues that kept you from getting a job. And I have been privy to a particular job that when I left the Hill on one occasion, after some time when my vice president left and I inherited his office, I saw the hiring documents from my hire. And they hired people from the Hill. They were specifically looking for someone black because there's no one black within the organization. And I am proud to say I'm an affirmative action baby. I wear it proudly, because if it had not been for affirmative action in my first job on the Hill, which was on the Senate side, I wouldn't have been there. And all that meant was that someone looked outside of their friends and their specific network to the same type of pool of people with the same type of background, having done internships on the Hill, been a political science major, okay, this person is well vetted to come to the Hill, they just happen to be black. And the particular position was circulated in a Congressional Black Caucus publication at that time, as opposed to only Roll Call or only National Journal, those publications of the time. And when I looked at cleared out that desk and I looked at the documents, I knew everyone who was my competitor for the job, because we all worked on the Hill. We were all black, predominantly women. There was one black male, and a very good friend of mine. And I'm giving you an example. The hiring came down to this particular black male and myself. And so I actually saw the columns used and the questions, and it was panel type of interview where there was 8 people, all the vice presidents and the executive staff that you went before. You went through about 3 different scenarios and interviews before you got to the final, which was a panel of all of the executives. And being vetted at that level and then seeing how it played out on paper, one of the columns was control. Can this person be controlled? And the perspective of my colleagues was the black male could not be controlled, their perspective. So we'll take the black female that, they thought could be controlled. They didn't know who they were getting. So there are things that go on in hiring. I have 1,300 employees, so I've hired a lot of people in my career. And there are a lot of things that go into hiring that you'll never know, that are the unseen. What I would say to that is to always do your best, always leave a portfolio, an impression on every job that you've had, from the internship to the paid staff position in any environment. But also don't hinder yourself. And I go back to what I said, learn how to read an environment and read people and read the environmental cues, because something that has stuck with me since I was an undergrad and used to come from Michigan to the Howard University communications conferences. And I had the privilege of being in a luncheon with Percy Sutton, who many of you may know. He was the founder and president of Intercity Broadcasting Network, I think was the title of it, in New York, BLS, et cetera. And Earl Graves, they were the keynote speakers. Earl Graves, obviously the founder and publisher of Black Enterprise. And this was over 30 years ago. And what Mr. Graves and Mr. Sutton, they played off of each other. They said, and I see it today over and over, that a lot of people can't do this: show up on time, and show up dressed for the job. Showing up dressed for the job, or showing up to be a part of that environment, is very, very critical, because when you show up and you have something about your appearance, not physical, you can't do anything about your physical, but something about your appearance where you're doing you, but the environment you have to scan. If you're going to Wall Street, you're going to look a certain way. If you're going to the fashion industry, you're going to look a certain way. If you're going to Capitol Hill, you're going to look a certain way. Now, I'm saying this as a person, a woman who integrated the United States Senate with the one blue suit that I have only owned in my lifetime, with the IBM little bow tie that we wore back then. And after I got the interview and the job, I gave it quickly to one of my girlfriends because I can't wear a blue suit. I don't feel comfortable in it. I'm someone who, as you see me now, and some of my colleagues that I see over the years say, I can't believe you're on the Hill in leopard print and zebra print, because I did me. However, I did what was needed and necessary to get the job, to look the role, to look the part, to show up looking like that environment. And that's an environmental scan. That's about reading the temperature. I have seen people terminated because of sexism. They weren't wearing pantyhose and they weren't wearing high heels on Capitol Hill, okay? Because it's not only little private corporations, they're fiefdoms. And as an elected official now, I certainly do say to some of my staff on times, this is not a democracy. This is a dictatorship, and I'm the dictator. You will do what I say, and that's because one of my bosses said that to us. So it's very important that you look like where you're going. I'm not saying don't do you, but you got to do you in a modified manner that allows you to not have that do-you-ism be the only thing that the potential employer sees. You should never be, after an interview, and there's 6 or 7 candidates, for them to just say, oh, it's that person with the crazy hair, from their perspective. Or it's that person with the odd outfit, from their perspective. So it's all about reading the environment and knowing how to show up, and show up on time, and show up ready for the job.
Thank you. Want to get your question?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. My name is Lamar Rogers. I'm a current CBCF emerging leader. As far as your time back at the CBCF, I was wondering, like, the different options you had afterwards and the opportunities. What is the best fit for each one of you? Why do you choose what you chose, and what was the motive behind that, basically?
You want to start? You want me to start?
I'm a relationships person, so I like talking to people. I like engaging with people. I like interacting with people on multiple different levels. I also like things to be a bit crazy. And so, for me, I built a series of, mentorships and with people who have been around, on the Hill, in the White House, on campaigns, and, kind of looking at them saying, I'm really young, don't really know what I want to do, but what do you think, what do you think is a good fit for me? That's not a good question when you're in the job interview, but when you're with your mentor, you can ask and say, what do you see me, what were my strengths when I was working for you? And so my boss, she said, you can juggle a lot of balls and you know how to talk to people. And, she then hooked me up with an interview to do finance, do fundraising. I was a finance assistant at the DNC. And from there, I would have never thought, when I graduated high school, I thought I was going to be a doctor. Like, what? And now I'm doing fundraising. But the fact that, it was being very open to that. It was new, it was weird. I didn't have any idea where that would lead me, but doing it, I did it hard. And, and my boss put me through the ringer as far as, figuring out, you get on the phone, and until you raise X amount of money, don't get up out of your chair, but being open, I think, when you're looking to the next thing, know your skill set and kind of have like your base, like 3 things that you're good at, and talk to people that you can kind of like have family talk with about what they think would be good. Be open to a lot of stuff, because you never know where you'll fall. Now, I've been doing fundraising for a little bit now, and I love it, and I think that, I may not do it forever, but it was something that, I worked hard for my bosses, and, they kind of said, this is something that, maybe you should do, and I took to it.
And I just want to add on, when I was in college, when I graduated, I wanted to be a lawyer, go to law school. It was just something that sounded good, be a lawyer. But when I was in office, Congressman Bobby Scott's office as an intern, I talked to a lot of people. I did make a mentor, and they asked me questions to help me find what it is I really wanted to do. They were like, okay, so why do you want to be a lawyer? Well, I love politics. I want to be in the legislative process. What about politics? What about the legislative process? What are you passionate about? And so in his office, I worked a lot with education policies, writing memos on that, and dealing with what's going on in the workforce. And if you would have asked me 2 years ago, would I be a teacher? Kids, why would I be with kids? Kids were not for me. But I'm a teacher 2 years later because I majored in criminal justice, and I always wanted to deal with youth, but I wanted to deal with youth in correctional facilities and stuff like that. Just merging that whole school to prison pipeline, that's what I was interested in. But they helped me realize, well, why don't you be more in the proactive end? Why don't you be in the classroom? Why don't you be with the students before they do end up, in prison or whatever may happen outside the classroom? And so that just, talking with a lot of people and with them asking you questions, what have you done in the past? What has always made you happy? What do you always find yourself doing eventually? And I found that I was always working with kids, always working with youth in some type of way. And that led me to join Teach for America, and I love it. I love being a teacher, and I never grew up saying I would be a teacher, never. But I still love the legislative process. I still want to be in education, but I realized being in the classroom has taught me a lot that I didn't even know that was going on within the education system that I wouldn't have known unless I stepped foot into a classroom.
I think my journey is a little different from a lot of people in terms of how I got to where I am. So, and my brother and college friend Gregory is here, and he can kind of help me with this, but we're getting ready for graduation. It was a week before graduation, in fact, and I was working at FedEx Kinko's on County Line Road in Jackson, and an alum of my school came in to the facility, and of course I was there. I had my little jump drive on my neck and my little apron, and welcome to FedEx Kinko's, and just was really, any job you do, make sure you do it to the best of your ability, right? So I let my personality show through that, and the reason that she and I connected was because she had a Tulu alumni sweatshirt on, and anyone who knows anything about HBCUs and being an alum, it's like the most privileged thing in the world. You're like, you sit in an alum of your school, you're like, oh, I went there too. You have instant family environment, and so through just a conversation with her and, me introducing myself to her and her asking me what it was that I planned on doing after FedEx Kinko's. And I said, well, I'm applying to law school, I'm getting ready to take the GRE. And she was like, well, have you, and in the South, everybody calls you baby, so that's just the thing. So she was like, well, baby, have you ever interned anywhere? And I was like, yes, ma'am. I've done a couple of clerkships, worked for a couple of lawyers. And she was like, well, have you ever been out of the state? And I was like, well, no, ma'am, not for interning. And she was like, well, I'm gonna connect you with one of my good friends who happened to be the congressman of all people. She connected me to his office, and through two interviews, well, actually three interviews with two with the office, one with the foundation, I got hired as their congressional intern for the summer. And from that, I took off with it. I knew that I only had 2 months to make an impact, and that impact would determine whether or not I would stay here or I would go elsewhere. And in doing that, it just taught me a lot about myself, strategy, skills, all of that, but more so about relationship building, because I was able to come back after my internship was over, work at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation in the office of Dr. ALC Scott during ALC, and that's where I had to put my game face on, because I knew she was the boss. She was the boss of the boss of the boss of the boss. And so in doing that, really setting the tone. And so she was impressed with the work that I did. I actually spearheaded a prison to pipeline panel during ALC, and so she was impressed with that work. She was impressed with the work that I did in her office as her assistant, and she kept me on for an additional 6 months. So that bought me time here in the city. She helped cultivate me. She helped me develop my relationships and skill sets, which allowed me to take that to the Hill. And from the Hill, once I was on the Hill, it was all about networking and, becoming just really an infrastructure, just really becoming someone who could take something to the next level. And from that, it helped put me in this position, because all I do is coalition build, fundraise, programming. That's my most passionate thing. If I can sit down and come up with a concept how to make someone's life better, that's what I do. And that's what I've been doing with Nobel in these last 5 months is coming up with programming so that the work that I do is always impactful and it's affecting my community, the community that birthed me and gave me a shot. It's now my turn to give something back to it. And so that's where, that's kind of how you take every little piece of thing that you're given in life and you make something mean from it. If it's just crossing the street and helping somebody, who's dropped something, make that mean something because that meant something to that person who you helped. So just really keep that in mind when you're doing things and always stay focused on that. Your internship now, it may seem like it's just a few months or a few weeks, but trust me, it will mean something for the rest of your life. So make the most of it.
If I might say, and another lady right here has a question, just because of length of time, my career has had quite a few turns. I think that at the beginning of your career, it's very critical to understand what your passion is and start envisioning things. And when you're in an environment such as Capitol Hill and working for these members of Congress, you're going to meet a lot of people, which has been said, and you're probably experiencing that, those of you who are on the Hill. I would say for me, at the bottom of the day, the end of the day, I'm a writer. That's what I do. And everything that I have done, I've been an executive director of a foundation, of a nonprofit. I've been an executive producer of Grammy shows. I have been television producer, radio producer, on-air talent, lobbyist, all of that. But all of that required writing, and writing for me started out in school, but even in school, and I'll go back to high school, I went to Cass Tech in Detroit, and I was in performing arts, and I really am not someone who likes to be in front of the camera. I am actually rather shy and retiring. And so in the performing arts curriculum, I preferred being in the production arena, and I preferred being a voice. I did a lot of voiceover as a youth, and some of you may have grown up on the books where you heard me say, Jack and Jill went up the hill and beep, turn the page, because I liked being behind the scenes, doing things. But I understood that writing was the gateway. Writing on the Hill, you write certain types of ways, and writing in other environments, you write certain types of ways. And what I found fast forwarding through my career, it's very difficult for other people to understand what it is that I do, because people put labels on you. And if your title doesn't reflect, if your title wasn't communications director or marketing director or legislative something, a lot of times they can't really see what it is you do because they're not going to read the paragraph that says what you did and what you had an impact and your accomplishments. So I would hope that you, at this early part of your career, and every 5 years, you take an assessment of yourself. What is it that you do over and over and over again, no matter what type of job or what organization you go to? What's the core thing you do? And that really helps to define what it is that what you do, what's your profession. And it may be in a different environment, but what do you do every day? So me, I'm a writer. That's what it boils down to.
We're going to get to a couple more questions before we get back to the panel.
Well, my name is Mrs. Joy Nichols, and I've been in this area since '79. And I started with General Accounting Office, and I left dealing with Martin Luther King's birthday and got a pink slip. But right now I'm working for Advocate for Justice and Education. I feel that I helped build this DC area because we have participated in all the mayors and drawing the community in, and that's how we built this DC area. Now, I also have been working with Virginia and Maryland, but DC is special because it is the capital, and as an intern, you'll be able to learn a lot about what's going on in the city. I actually had a chance to go to the hearing because I have House seats and Senate, and give those tickets to the community, but the community is afraid to come in. And you as representatives should be friendly when people come in, because if you give them information, then that's how you're going to get your mission accomplished, because you need people in your community, and you have to be people friendly, and you have to have a heart for the community. That's it.
Thank you. And I actually that message actually resonates for anybody who's from an urban community. I'm from Trenton, New Jersey. I think that what's so great about this opportunity is that we are in one of the most prosperous cities in the United States, right? But it's also one of the most segregated. So one thing that I know I speak to with mentees, regardless of whether they're in CBCF or not, is to never forget your surroundings. You know, we can't talk about we're all about service, but then walk past, you know, people that unfortunately for right now are, you know, challenged, whether it's through mental health, whether it's through housing. And not that you have to stop every time, because everyone has a hustle or has, you know, something to do. But if it doesn't even come across your mind as to what can I eventually do in the work that I do to assist that person or that community, then in a lot of ways, as we're always going to kind of fall short, right? Collectively, if we're not the conscious, if we're not the ones that are able to, again, either assist them, find ways to assist them, whether it's through speaking to our elected officials, speaking to our members of Congress, or even more directly, you know, when you're in the city here, people don't, a lot of the opportunities that the panelists have mentioned, they created those opportunities. Those titles, those positions didn't necessarily exist first for them to apply, you know, to that position. And it's the same thing with service. And I'll get to your question real quick, but I'm a lawyer by training. I'm a lot of things by training, but I'm a lawyer by training. And one thing that always got me was when people would say, yeah, I'm an attorney, but I can't really find a job. And my thing is like, well, there's always a job. It's just a matter of what you consider payment. And so if we recognize that, you know, we're kind of in a position, yeah, it's a heavy burden, but sometimes we're in a position to also take on the blessings of fellowships like this, but then to also pay it forward in different capacities, and one of which is serving in our community and making sure we don't forget that there are people that are still trying to gain access to people that are just right down the street from them.
My name is Henry Washington, Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Scholarship. I have a quick technical question. We covered the basics, dressing, working hard, coming early, staying all day, leaving late. We kind of got those fundamentals down. But when it comes to technical specialization, a lot of times we kind of get restricted to the issues of juvenile justice, education reform, poverty. These are critical issues for our community, but when it comes to specialization, should CBCF interns look to specialize in specific discipline areas or be jack of all trades, or should we stick to what we're good at because we have a certain perspective on these issues? Because I don't want to be, number one, typecast as the black person that talks about black issues all the time, but on the other hand, I don't want to step away from these issues because I don't want to be that black person when I know that my perspective is relevant on these issues, but I want to also go into things like fundraising, energy, have perspectives on foreign affairs, international commerce, and things like that, because I'm not limited to just black issues. So what would be your advice as former interns as far as specializing, how to spend our time, how to invest our time in the in-between as far as reading, getting with the LAs and the LAs in the offices, if you're on the Senate side or whoever is specializing on the issue, and learning from them. So what would you say as far as a technical resume thing? Should you specialize in one discipline, or should you just kind of lean toward the black issues, or what are perceived in many offices as African American issues?
Well, if you're going to be the jack of all trades, you be the best jack of all trades you can be. So one of the downfalls that many people risk is that they try to do too much. So if you're passionate, and it goes back to your passion. So, you know, Keith Benjamin is a transportation guy, right? You know, anything dealing with transportation, you're gonna probably look to Keith Benjamin for transportation because that's his passion, though, right? So it's easy to say, well, what should I put on my resume? Your resume is about, it should speak to who you are, right? So if Wakenya is all about diversity, you know, she's all about women, and she's all about black women, black people, you know, whatever her case may be, if it's housing, small business, the things that she does will speak to that, right? So anyone who knows me will tell you I'm passionate about minority diversity issues. That's who I am, that's what I'm most passionate about. So the work that I do, whether it's, you know, women empowerment events, or whether it's diversity on the Hill events, the work that I do will speak for me. You will know that that's who I am and what I really want to focus on. But in the meantime, I'm also, a young philanthropist. I love volunteering. I work hard for my school. I'm a proud alumni of my school. I care about Canton, Mississippi. If I don't care about any place else, if you ask me anything, I'm going to tell you Canton, Mississippi is where it's at, okay? But, those types of things speak to who I am. When I went back and spoke at my high school graduation in May, that's because I love my community. So that spoke to that. So I'm not around here trying to be, the know-all on housing authority. Because, though I'm passionate about that, Section 8 is a big issue in the state of Mississippi. That's not where my true focus is. My true focus is on people in general. So that's what, I'm a sociologist by trade. That's my focus, my background, that's who I am. So that's what I care about. I care about people.
I think a lot of it's going to depend upon the opportunities that are presented to you. So you're not going to know what you're going to specialize in until you see the position that's open and available, unless you create it for yourself. So from my experience, the first job that I took after my first job on the Hill, which was on the Senate side, where my portfolio was commerce, banking, appropriations, finance, and labor, because that's what my senators' committees were. So, that was the urban issues as well as agricultural issues because of our state. However, the position that presented itself to me at that particular time was not something, there were really no other blacks in that environment at that point in time. And was it a leap? No, it was an opportunity. It was it a passion? No. It was opportunity that availed itself. Those issues for me, I was able to embrace and move forward and actually get legislation like fire codes and regulations that we have in this building right now, sprinkler retrofitting, sprinklers, input into new developments, Americans with Disabilities Act. The most sexy issue that I had was underground storage tank retrieval and removal, because that had to deal with, it was hot. It had to do with all of our health, not just black people's health, but Americans' health, where there were, old oil tanks and abandoned buildings that had seepage that typically were going into urban communities because that's where we're located, but that seepage was also going to impact our food sources and our livestock. So, there was tax policy. I worked a lot with the EPA at that time because of environmental policy, because of the sexiest thing out there was asbestos abatement, removing asbestos and friable products from buildings that were being rehabbed and renovated, all those historical things. So a lot of times it's not about what you specialize in on the forefront. You might have been a mechanical engineer by training, but you get into another organization, you apply that ability. It's all about transferable skills. And then you might find that you are passionate about what you never would have thought was sexy, but it has an impact that's far-reaching, or that you've just embraced, and you have come into another community that really is having a global impact, if not just one in this country. So I think you can make anything sexy. I made, toxic waste sexy because it's what was my portfolio. It's what I had to deal with. On the other hand, when I went to public broadcasting, Barney, Big Bird, and all of those characters were quite sexy to me. They were something that I made really national issues, because at that point in time, the Republican Congress was trying to defund public broadcasting. And a lot of people thought that public broadcasting, public radio, NPR, PBS, oh, well, that's just lily white, and it's just, these matrons who are married to bankers throwing money at it. No, I grew up on Sesame Street, okay? When Sesame Street was, only a few years old, electric company, Zoom, all of that. And what you'll find is what the common perception of a particular industry is all white or all Hispanic or what have you, but it services all. Black children in America are raised by their television. Okay, and now it's gone to the computer. But at that point in time, the television was the babysitter. So it's very important that that industry reflected people of color and had an educational impact, and the curriculums were far-reaching and comprehensive. So I think you make anything your specialty. It depends on what opportunity is presented to you.
Yeah, I think one of the things to focus on now is your skill sets, which are very different from kind of your focus areas or expertise, right? So like when you're applying for a job, they're going to ask you what competencies do you have? Like what are you able to do functionally? So being able to identify what you're good at or what you want to do functionally is going to be important to focus there versus your expertise on a certain issue. I will say a lot of times coming out of college, you're like, oh, I want to get in this industry to make a lot of money. Well, the cool thing about DC is that every industry, every issue intersects in this city. And there are both folks on Capitol Hill, so there's a policy side there's a lobby side, and then there's the advocacy side on the outside. So like all three of those, and the business side as well. So all four of those areas play a huge role in determining whatever it might be. One of the things I've been really fascinated with over the past few years is seeing all the folks who are trying to now get into policy around the internet and telecommunications, and how telecommunications before was like, access to phone and that kind of stuff, but like now setting internet policy is like $1 billion industry now, that every player from Google to Apple to Microsoft is spending millions of dollars each week on lobbying is so interesting. So I would say don't think about it in terms of getting a job and getting money, but getting the skill sets that will allow you to do a multitude of jobs across multiple different arenas.
And,
I just would say anybody in this room could be a fundraiser. And it can be on any different level. I can, and I can't stress enough the importance, I think, of investing in a candidate or an idea. I think sometimes, there can be a debate about how much money is in politics, but the idea of, be it getting your friends together to donate $5 a piece towards something that you believe in, or, maximum level contributions, you can always have a toe in that, and I think that it's always, important to have that in the back of your mind, because that is where a lot of power is. And I think that once you kind of start to do it, and you kind of see that, I can do this, or I can put together $50, and all of a sudden you're putting together $50 or $5,000 and $10,000, and you can kind of see like, oh, this is a skill set that I can do, and it actually is applicable anywhere you go, it doesn't even have to be a career, but having that, that is something of importance, I think, is really something to also think about, especially in the political world. Even I look at Christina, she hit me up. She's a fundraiser. She hit me up just about something we're starting. She's like, oh yeah, and you're gonna give you $100 donation, right, Marcus? And I was like, oh yeah, you got me, But just simple thing, and that's just because we have a relationship, and and she was like making sure that keeping me honest with that. But I just I would be remiss if I did not stress the fact that anybody in here can be a fundraiser, and you can do it, and it's fun. And it has, implications for a lot of different things.
And let me just say really quickly, first of all, if you're black, you're black. So, and there is nothing wrong with that. And I say that with all sincerity. I grew up in Trenton, New Jersey. I went to high school in an urban area. I went to undergrad and grad at West Virginia University at a time where they still called people of color colored. And not because they were trying to be mean, that's just the way the state is. And I learned a lot from being in a majority environment. And then I went to law school back in New York, and then I came to DC to also pursue a different degree. And I learned a lot about race relations here. So I'm just saying that as number one. Number two, know the limitations of what you can get in your office, but also recognize, as Quentin had mentioned, that DC is literally, it's your playground. Like there is somebody that can connect you with either the person you want to meet or the skill that you want to develop. And one tip of advice that I would give, which was actually kind of related to an advice I heard earlier in a panel that I was involved in, is that if you have the opportunity, give yourself, whether it's once a week, if you're that ambitious, or once a month, reach out to somebody in the community, butter them up a little bit. Let them know that you've researched their area, let them know that you're interested in what they do, and set up a lunch where you can talk about what skills do I need to develop to be where you're at. Throw in that you're a CBCF intern or fellow, because this town knows what that means. So sometimes sometimes it is a little, and this is not that this was what was raised. One thing that I stress to individuals is definitely don't get frustrated because you're not getting all of what you want through this internship or fellowship experience. The one thing that this has given you is access to this town. That alone is your opportunity to speak and network with people with a title that, from individuals that came before us, from the Janice Hazels, from the 12 members of Congress that came through to be there so that we could have access. These are opportunities that were created, and these are things that we really should just take advantage of. So, the jack of all trades or specializing in one area, that also comes down to preference of an individual. But like Joaquina said, if you're going to be a jack of all trades, you got to be really good at it, because you are missing a lot by not focusing on one or two issues, because you could be an expert in one or two issues, and that could be your bread and butter. Being a jack of all trades means that at the drop of a hat, when they say Arab Spring, you better, which is what happened to me. I just happened to be the first one on Twitter when it occurred and broke at like 2 a.m. in the morning, and the next thing you know, I'm advising all of the members of the CBC as to like which embassies are still considered embassies and which ones no longer exist, and what we need to do moving forward. That's how crucial your connection to even social media or just connection to colleagues can be. It can change overnight. So I'll get this question, and then there's one remaining question that I want to ask each one of the panelists that they've already kind of touched on, which is skills and or steps. So I guess you guys can start thinking about that now. Skills and or steps that people can, especially interns on the Hill, should be doing, practices that they should be doing to kind of transition them from the end of their internship or fellowship to that position that many of you all desire.
Okay, and since you just mentioned desire, once again, everyone, my name is Erica Page. I'm an Emerging Leaders intern currently, and we get so much training, and we are just absorbing, so much knowledge at this point in our lives. And one question that I have, and I think about this all the time, and I kind of have my own ideology about it, but I really would like you all, your opinion about it, because, you all have so much expertise, we need it. Passion and purpose versus opportunity. How do you, and when do you, and how do you utilize that instinct to know when to take an opportunity that may not necessarily be your passion or purpose, or to hold out, maybe see it through, maybe try to work and grind a little more to do the passion and the purpose? Does that make sense?
Prayer.
Okay. Well, I mean,
I was going to say prayer and meditation.
we don't know how to do both, because every opportunity is not a good opportunity.
Right.
But you never know when you're missing out on it. Sometimes people just battle with that internally.
Right. Well, Erica, hi. Erica and I met via email, so now this is our face-to-face. So, what I would say about that is that your passion or your purpose typically changes because of opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. So opportunity is one of those things that comes few and far between for a lot of people. So it's about surveying, right? When I came to the Hill as an intern, that wasn't my passion or my purpose, that was an opportunity. And so I took that opportunity though and said, this is what I'm gonna do with it, right? I'm gonna take this to put Canton, Mississippi on the map. I'm gonna take this to put Tougaloo College on the map. That's what I'm gonna do with this now. Now that was that purpose for that opportunity, right? But my passion, now that's one thing I can say has never changed, and that was to be a servant of the people, right? So service and servitude are two totally different things for the most part, right? But I had a commitment to people in general, right? To humankind, to want to make sure that the work that I do was impactful and it made a difference for somebody else. It's so hard, to your point, that not every opportunity is a good one, right? So there are some opportunities come for your season. So, for instance, I had a mentee who called me. She was really struggling whether or not she should take a job in a corporation, or whether or not she should go back to school, or whether or not she should come to Capitol Hill. I said, where are you right now? She said, well, she was like, I just really don't want to do it. I said, but what will it allow you to do later? So will this opportunity allow you to do what you want to do later on? I'm a firm believer in doing what you have to do until you can do what you want to do. Now, that's one of the things that's worked for Wakenya. I can tell you that. It wasn't easy sitting there, college educated, felt like, oh my God, I don't think I'm doing this job. I'm typing, I'm talking to constituents all day, I'm making coffee, I'm folding newspapers, I'm doing this, I'm working on special events. I'm doing all of these different things, but not knowing that those things were preparing me for something greater, right? So you got to humble yourself, one. Take advantage. That's the only thing I can say is, but when it comes to opportunity, now I'm not going to tell you go out there if your opportunity is to work on DC law enforcement and you really don't know anything about guns, to go out there and do that. I'm not going to tell you to do that. But what I will tell you is to really take a step at it. I think what we've all kind of touched on the panel is to not be afraid to do something that you've never done before. Because if you don't, nothing is ever done until someone does it, right? That's the reality of it. So be just open, don't live your life in a shell. Think about it like this. There are a number of people who were given a similar opportunity to yours, right? Some of them did great with it, some of them did not do so well. You are very unique in the sense that you have the opportunity to make this moment whatever you want it to be for the rest of your life. That's your particular opportunity at this point. So just, don't stray away from it. I say embrace it. Change is a good thing sometimes,
When you're really good at what you do, the stars kind of align sometimes, if that makes sense. And it has a really weird way, and sometimes you have the most convoluted path, but it's a weird way they just kind of come together. So I'll tell you, so I was a White House intern at the National Economic Council, and I was, dead set, I'm staying, I want to stay, I want a job, I want to get hired, and my boss was like, ain't nobody gonna hire you. But I was running, anybody who would have coffee, they're running through the halls singing, I'm telling you, I'm not going, I'm not leaving, I'm sticking in this building. And, a job emerged, but I was a White House switchboard operator. And that was the toughest, most, it was very stressful, but, it was a very, what we would traditionally think a low skill set. You don't really need a lot of policy background to be able to connect phone calls, and so, but I was like, look, I'm taking it, if you're gonna pay me to be here, fine, I will answer whatever. And so that job wound up being, you took, all the public calls, but then it went all the way from, staff calls to, and it was a 24/7 office where, I was waking up the president. I would call him and, wake him up in the morning, and that was a crazy experience. Would I ever do that job again? Hell no. But that was something that, traditionally, if you would have thought I'd come to DC to answer, to be a switchboard operator, I'd be like, oh, probably not. But, fast forward now, and what I'm doing and the importance of talking to literally that wide range of people, from all the way to when I am putting together an event with the president to, doing the lowest of dollar fundraising, I have to have this huge range of people that I can talk to. And that was a function of, I had a great boss and people looking out for me, and, and I worked hard at everything I did, and, I did well in that role, but it kind of fell in place, and things kind of, that, they tend to happen sometimes like that. Now that's not always the way it is, and you will fail sometimes, things will not always go right, but rest in the fact that if you're good at what you do, and you keep a good head about it, that things tend to happen well for you.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's an important function for Quentin, for prayer and meditation. So I'll never forget, in 2008, I started volunteering with students for Barack Obama, because one of my friends who was working with the NAACP became a staff for the campaign early on and needed somebody to do some volunteer work in South Carolina, where I happened to be living. And I didn't understand at the time that my state is actually really important in the presidential election process, because I had never voted. I was only 19 at the time, but hadn't had a presidential. And so fast forward a few months later, I got the chance to be a field organizer in my hometown, but I would have to leave school. And I was on a full ride scholarship at Furman University, a small liberal arts college in South Carolina. and my parents said no, my mentor said no, but I had this gut feeling that, you know what, I want to take this risk, right? Like, I'm a poli-sci major in class, and this class is telling me all about this process, but I want to be a part of it. And so I left a full ride scholarship to go work on the campaign, and I would never recommend anyone in this room do that. But my path turned out because my gut told me to do this. I took a risk, and, you know, we won. We had a huge victory in South Carolina, about 40 points. But taking that risk, I think, is what helped me get to where I am now, of being able to discern between opportunity and not taking that opportunity, right? So that risk, don't be afraid of the unknown. There will be risk and sacrifice and people telling you no, but I think through that, for me, through prayer, meditation, through just challenging myself, I was able to discern that. So it's a hard skill set. We've heard a lot about being able to do temperature reading, judge a room, judge opportunity, judge your member, your boss. That stuff is really, really, really important. And so as much time as you can spend with yourself while you're here in DC as well, taking some time to go out in the mall and just think and meditate about this opportunity in this space will do you a lot. And you'll remember that time you spent thinking about this stuff. It's really important.
And then reality sinks in that there's rent, and if you've been around for a while, there's mortgages, and some will have children, and there'll be tuition. So you have to be realistic, I think, about those opportunities. But we're in a place and time that is so wonderful that you can do what you need to do so that you can do what you want to do. Mm-hmm. And that means that if you have to continue with that job that is unfulfilling and appears to be dead end, but your passion is in something else, perhaps in the policy arena, then you can create the space for yourself now. Everyone can be a publisher. Everyone can be self-published on the internet by blogging about the issue. So you may not be able to actually leave your job that is keeping your sustenance going and all the very many obligations you may have at a certain point in time.
I just wanted to add it. One thing that I was told by my mentor that definitely helped me within the past couple of years is that your life is a story. I used to think of it as a timeline of, I needed to do this within 4 years, this needed to be done within 3. Life is a story, and there are going to be opportunities that will come your way that may seem like they're deviating you away from what your passion is, but sometimes you have underlying passions that just haven't been lit on fire yet. Mm-hmm. And you just take advantage of opportunities that allow you to grow. So if it's going to allow you to grow into a better person, there's something that you can see out of that opportunity that will allow you to be better in some type of way. It may not be what you believe directly aligned with your passion, but I do believe that a lot of things are interconnected. You can take a lot of skill sets away from other opportunities to help build your passion, to make you a more powerful person when it comes to making your passion come true. And so look at life as a story. You may not get to do everything within a time that you expected to do. There's going to be those opportunity detours. Maybe you do have to do something that's realistic in order to survive, but there's always going to be a way to learn and take that to add to your passion or those underlying passions that just haven't been lit on fire yet.
If I might also say, just from experience and also having been a writer who's participated in some chapters of some curriculum that many HBCUs were required to study, which was Credit Wise and Money Wise, that grew out of a TV show that I worked on, which was Money Wise by Calvin Boston, that was syndicated throughout the country. I would say, word to the wise, do not get yourself into debt. There is some debt that you're going to have when you come out of school and these internships, but be rather miserly and frugal, and that will carry you far. I certainly have debt in certain areas, but, I was always the one who was ostracized for driving a 10 and 12-year-old vehicle, a hoopty, because it didn't matter that much to me. I didn't really care about that. Yes, my relatives were in the automotive industry. I could have had a new car, different car every year. But for me, as long as it had, my first thing was, can I get air conditioning? Okay, so I got air conditioning, and then it was, can I get power windows? Okay, I got power windows. But really for me, and even at this point in time, with 3 vehicles in 3 different states that I have to have multiple residences, all I need is for it to move and get me from point A to point B. So don't get caught up, I would advise you, in the labels, the designers, the keeping up with the Joneses. Do you, and don't get yourself into debt so that you can afford to walk away from a job or a situation that is unfulfilling and go and, channel yourself into your passion. But if you get yourself bogged down with really unnecessary outward-facing debt, then you can't do that. And that will have an impact on you, how you manage that debt in the future. So, be realistic, keep those 3 outfits, a couple pairs of shoes, but, you don't need all that other stuff, because if an opportunity avails itself and it's on the other side of the country or the other side of the world, you want to be able to cut quickly. And you could do that all before you're 30 if you don't bog yourself down with outward-facing things that really don't mean anything. Look at your Steve Jobs and others who walk around in T-shirts and jeans. None of that stuff means anything to them, but they can buy it 50 billion times over and over. So, be realistic, manage your debt, do what you want when you want to.
And just so we can honor time, we have about 8 minutes left, and I want each panelist to give one piece of advice in about 60 seconds each, moving forward. The one thing I just wanted to add, right, is something that's a little different that some people don't think about, but was told to me quickly within the first 3 months when I was here by another former alum who's now in the White House, or with the administration, Mr. David Johns. One thing he said to me was, DC provides a lot of glassy balls. Resist grabbing all of them. And it was very interesting, because I think one thing that you have to also assess is you may be presented with an opportunity that you're not ready for yet. Mm-hmm. And I think that happens far too often. And recognize that as a member of this family, an extension of this foundation, an extension of this of the foundation, that when you go into a situation prematurely, you are also still representing more than just yourself. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about opportunities, I'm a person of faith, so I also think that there are times when the right opportunity comes at the wrong time. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, with my path, the reason why I'm in New York was because there were certain opportunities that were presented to me in DC that maybe other people didn't think that way, but I knew Iffy better than anybody else knew Iffy, and I was like, first of all, I may not be ready for those. I'm humble that I'm considered for those positions, but sometimes you have to turn away from a position just being humbled and just patting yourself on the back. But you also have to. I also recognize that I could go in those positions and do very well, but what are the other things that I really want to do that being in that position would not allow me to do? I too I grew up as an artist. I too also write. I wanted to get back to New York. I wanted to continue pursuing screenwriting. So I knew that New York was a better environment to do that than, say, DC. So just recognizing what matters to you as a person that you don't have to share with everyone, that everyone may not even see. In DC, a lot of times what we see are people's hustle. We don't always see people's heart. So just recognize that what matters to you is what's going to determine whether that opportunity is for you for the grabbing now or something that you preserve and pursue later. Because guess what? If that person sees that in you now, imagine what they'll see later on. They should always still remain a contact and a network. So that's not going to change. So I'm just saying that don't be quick to jump on something so great, but also recognize what you're lacking for some of these positions. And if each one could briefly in 60 seconds or less, if you have one, if you don't, it's okay. If there's one piece of advice, or I like kind of the whole point of like action verbs, like if there's an action that all of us can take away that has helped you in your process, please share with us now before we wrap up.
Cool. I'll start. I have 5 actually, but these will be quick, I promise. On the first level, learn how to write a memo. Very basic, you should do that. Second, protect your reputation. The people in your program with you will be working with you for the next 20, 30 years, so protect your reputation. Third is learn how to facilitate a meeting. Every meeting should have an agenda, a note taker, a timekeeper. Know how to run a good meeting. And I would say fourth, actually there's 4 pieces. Learn, some of your colleges offer project management certification. Big skill set you'll need in terms of any career in DC is learning how to manage projects. And so for you to be certified in that area will up your salary, up your ability to do lots of other jobs in your career. But get that early if you can while you're still in school, because it could be free for some of you. Because when you're not in school, it's very expensive.
I'll say 2 quick things. Build relationships. You need a team. even if you come into this world alone, you ain't got family or whatever it is, you can, if you being here, you can start building relationships and kind of have a team that has your back and has your best interests at heart. And two, you can't get away with everything that other people can get away with. So be careful. That's really all I have to say about that.
That's good. That was good.
I would say always operate with integrity and let people know that your word really is your bond. I'll go back to something that the great Shirley Chisholm taught me and wrote extensively about, and was what she was about: be unbought and unbossed. If you're unbought, if you don't owe people anything, I mean, you're going to owe some favors, but try to stay away from that. Quid pro quo can come back and bite you in the worst way at the wrong time. So definitely always operate with integrity in everything that you do, and know that when you're calling in favors, someone's going to ask something of you, and it may not be the best thing for you to have to pay back. So do things above board and with integrity always.
I would just repeat what I said before. Make sure you're forming genuine relationships with people that you meet. Stay in contact with them. You shouldn't just email them when you're expecting them to get you a job or something like that. You need to stay in contact with them. Make sure it's a genuine relationship, because that speaks louder. That is your network, the people who you have those relationships with, not just a number of business cards that you have in your wallet. It's the relationships that you have. The second thing I would say, I'm going to steal this from my executive director for CFA in Baltimore: be humble yet hungry. And I think that's something that a lot of people have spoke on. You need to be very humble with a lot of the opportunities that you're given, but always be hungry for more. I currently work at a school in Baltimore that's built like a bomb shelter with no AC, so we have one window in the classroom, and when it's 97 degrees, I'm sweating, my students are sweating. That will humble you. But I'm hungry for more. My students, I'm trying to put that passion in them to always be hungry for more despite your circumstances, and that's a powerful phrase that I've always kept with me.
Well, I kind of had some, but they kind of took them. But I'll just reiterate a couple of things. So the first thing is to don't be afraid to take risk. Don't be afraid to be who you are. And then the last thing I would say is your A team, right? So this is not your clique. This is your A team. These are people who you can call on in like the blink of an eye and say, Greg, I need this paper brief before I send it out. Miss Marsha, I'm dealing with this. How can, what do you recommend, basically? These are not people who are necessarily your peers, but people who you can trust your name with. These are people who you know that won't do you any harm. They're not intimidated by you. They want to see you do just as well as you want to do, or if not better. So you need an A team. I mean, they don't always have to look like you. They don't always have to talk like you, dress like you. Everyone has something that can contribute to you, but it is in your best interest to know the types of people who are giving you this advice. So, in addition to the genuine relationships, and addition to, the coalition building, be very, very strategic in how you adapt your A team. When it comes down to mentors, oftentimes the people who are your best mentors are not the ones you've asked to be your mentor, right? You can get some mentors that you can ask because they're going to be good people for you, but people who really genuinely have your back, who you can confide in, are known the people who you can honestly say that are your mentors. So
my mentor is a 60-year-old, 4'11" Asian woman. I am 6'5" and black. Well, it's hilarious.
And actually, I'm glad we're speaking about mentors. This is my only advice before we thank our panelists, is interview your mentors. Everyone is not meant to be your mentor. At this age and where you're at, tie a mentor to some type of goal, skill, or outcome that you're looking for. And also be polite, but also be prepared to tell somebody who wants to mentor you, because a lot of your skills and abilities will shine. Find a polite way to say thanks, but no thanks, because everyone is not necessarily in a position to help you in a mentor-mentee mentee relationship. They may be able to help you as a connector, as a networker, and you should be able to find a way to professionally convey that. But what I'm realizing now is that the mentors that were a part, that knew I was a fellow, are still the mentors now that are still pouring into me. And one thing that I'll leave you with, and I think it's also symbolic of the foundation, is I said to her, thank you for all that you're giving me. And she said, no, I'm not giving you anything. I'm investing in you because you represent me. And when you spring forward, I have something to do with that. So that let me know that she was willing to give her all because she's also trusting that I'm going to be able to produce my best. So with that being said, please help me thank all of these great alumni. And hopefully you all will be a part of the Alumni Association if you are not already. Another member of the board has showed up, Ms. Christina Harper. Please ask us questions. Please also keep us informed of what programs and ideas that you guys would like to see. I know there were certain things that were mentioned that we are going to try to incorporate moving forward. And before the panelists leave, if we all could just come together in front here and take a picture or two, that would be great. Hopefully you all network, meet some of these people. I always say with panels, I look at panels now as $1 million industries. Like there's $1 million up here just because the wealth of knowledge that's here could literally be the difference.
Put my piece in that, though. I
The
need my
difference
piece before I
between
leave.
your today and tomorrow. And clearly we have reached our time. But thank you all again. And hopefully you all will be at the CBCF Alumni Reception, which will be tomorrow at the National Realtors Association, which is on New Jersey Avenue. Oh, I did good. I did really good. And it starts at 6:30. So we really hope that you all will be there. Please spread the word. If you have not RSVP'd, please do so. Thank you.